Ochoyo sambo pagyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolor zambe zebarche pande lame shabla solwade Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishasa Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma A Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Pakyuke kudan dagi lu pakyuke sundan dagi nga pakyuke tukdan dagi yi tön yerme çıktı çingi lu makyuke kudan dagi lu Makyuke sundan dagi nga Makyuke tukdan dagi tön yerme çıktı çingi olu Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Cominciamo.
We shall start with the prayers, traditional prayers of recitation that are traditionally done at the beginning of these teachings. I sometimes feel a bit as if we are in the middle of a bridge, where on one side there is the way with which these teachings were transmitted and practices for centuries, and on the other side there is a reality, a context that is culturally and socially very different from the context where these teachings were transmitted for centuries. And so there is a fundamental job of adaptation for the moment where we are now, because the goal is not an academic study, a conceptual study, so to speak, but the goal is to move something inside of each one of us, some qualities that we want to develop. And so we need to adapt to the times where we find ourselves, but at the same time without losing the bound, the validity, the experience, all that is given or that is best. And very often one of the aspects that I see as a bit dangerous in this process is that the tendency is that whether it remains like very rigidly how things were done until now, or to go to in a superficial way, losing the profundity. This is what usually I see that are the two dangers that are there. And for this, we need to put together a collective effort to find the balance. And so these prayers that we now use the term prayers, but actually they are some verses where we dedicate and reflect on the emptiness of intrinsic existence and eliminate the interferences, ask for the blessings to the various masters of the lineage, and then there is the moment where we ask the blessings to realize each one of the steps in this path. And today again I wanted to follow these prayers in the traditional way as they were recited for centuries. Also, when I received these teachings, it was done in this way, and also those like after me, and so like this for centuries. And so it's important for us to go on like this, and then a bit further on we will adapt this prayer, making an adapted version in Italian where we simplify a bit, more adapted to our reality. So along this path, I feel like we are on this bridge where sometimes we go on one side, sometimes on the other, and we need to make this passage from one side of the bridge to the other to maintain things in the right way. So I ask also on your side an attitude. The correct way of saying is also not really patience, but like to be able sometimes to get into it without being in a situation of control. That is not, I don't necessarily understand everything. I know what it is about, but I don't need to understand everything to allow oneself to get into it. Then we get into the part of explanation where we get into all the details and so on. So the first part, the recitation of the Heart Sutra is done. Also, actually, the correct term is the Sutra of the essence of the perfection of wisdom. And at the end of this recitation, there is a moment where we clap the hands 3 times, and this represents eliminating interferences. So, during this day, during these teachings, whatever interference, mainly the internal ones, so fear, arrogance, uncertainty, doubts, hatred, jealousy, whatever emotion that takes our attention away, or that it pollutes our hearing, that should be completely eliminated. Then we ask for the blessings and we remember and generate gratitude towards each one of the people that there were a lot of them, but the main ones from which we received these teachings through a line of transmission up to us. So now we start with the recitation of the Heart Sutra.
Kuncho sumla cha lo dike dake tepa tuchi na chumdende gyalpu kap chago pumbo rila gelongi gendun chenpo dan janchu sembe gendun chenpo dan taba chiktu shode te tse chumdende Samu nangwa she chawe chege namrange tinge zinla nyumbra shu so yang te tse jancho semba semba chenbo papa chenrezi wangjo sherage parotu chimba samo cheba nil nambra tashin pumbo ngabo teda layang ran shinge tomba nambra tawo Tene sangye ge tu tsedan denpa sha Jancho sempa sempa chenpo pakpa chenre zi wanjo la dike che me so Rigi pu kangla la sheragi paru tu jimba sam Chepa chupra dupa te jidra labra cha tike che me pa dang janju semba semba chimbo pakpa chenre zi wangchu ki sedan demba shara tati pula dige che me so shari pu rigi puwa rigi pumo kan la la sheragi paru tu jimba sam chepa chopra depa te didra nambra tawara chate pungbo ngabo teda kyang ran shinge tomba nambra yandakbra jesu tawo so tomba tomba ni so so sole tomba ni shema yi tomba ni le kyang so shema yi no tishin tu tsorwa dan du she dan du che dan nambra sheba namna tongba wo sharipu Tedra che tamche tongba ni te tseni meba ma keba ma gakpa tima meb tima dan trawa triwa meba kangwa meba o sharipu Teta we na tongba ni la so me tsorwa me duche na me nambra sheba me Mig me nawa me na me che me lu me yi me su me dra me tri me ro me rekcha me che me to migi kam me ba ne yigi kam me yigi nambra shebe kam ge pardo ya me to marikba seba me ba Ashime gashi sebe pardo yame to Teshin tu dunge wadang kunchung wadang gokpa dang Lame yeshe me topa me mato payame to Sharipu tetawe na chanchu semba nam topa mebe chir Sheragi parutu jimbala tenching nete semla dripa mechin trakpa met Chinchi lole shindu dene nyange le debe tar chindu tu sundu nambra shub Sangye tamche kya sheragi paru tu jimbala tengne lana mepa yan dabra zob Janju tu ngombra zobra sangye so Te tawe na sheragi paru tu jimbe nga Rikpa chimbe nga lana mepa Minyam padanyam benga, dunge tamche rabdu shivra chebenga, mitsum pena dembra shebra chate sheragi paratu jimbenga, me pa tayata gate gate paragat, parasam gate bodhi swaha, sharipu janchu semba semba chimbu deda sheragi paratu jim, samola labra chao, Tene chumdende tinge zin, tele shende chanchu semba semba chem, pakpa chenrezi wanjo la lekso she jawa chingne, lekso rigi pu te shino rigi pu te shinte, jidra kyogi temba shindu sheragi paratu jimba samol chebra chate, deshin shekpa namkyan jesu yirango, Chumden degi digi cheka tsene tsedan denpa sharatati Janju semba semba chim Pakpa chenre zi wanju dan tam chedan denpe Kor teda dan la dan Mi dan lama yidan tisra chebe jikden irante Chumden degi sumba la ngombra tudum Kala chepe ne che tamba na ngwe she zudru ngawe tutoba chen drupa pola mayila pushin si ne son kandro tsula cha tse lo akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe 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 akka samaranza shatara samaraya Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe 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 tayata gate gate paragat parasamgate bodhisvoha Pakpa kuncho sumgi kai dembe topchir dog para gyurchi me para gyurchi shiwara gyurchi rabdu shiwara gyurchi drage parche mi tumbe chore tamchi shanti kuru yeswo ha geri tongra gechu shiwadang mi tunbe kendan chawadang tumba drupchin punsun tsogyurbe Trashi de kyan tendire dele sho. Richiesta di benedizioni di ognuno dei maestri del Lineage. Panden tsawe Lama Rinpoche dagi chivro pede tenshu la kadrin chimbu gone jesunte kuson tugi ngodru tsedu so kuson tugi ngodru tsedu so Jemba nyangme tenpa chumdende gyatsa tamba chitsum mi pangong gyawe longten pakpa tome sha sangye chansen sumla solwa de sangye chansen sumla sowa de zamli kebe tsugen yigi nye ume lamnye pakpa namdre de tebe sarne tsumba namdre de jikde mikche sumla solwa de Jikde mikche sumla solwa de meju ngotsara negyuru chogi de samu lamge gyuchan duwe de labchen chepe tergyu namnanze drowe tsala sumla sowa de lamjo sherchin geze sensan sha gyawe menga kunzin kusali drogun tsewe jinzin gewa chen Drove tepun sumla solwa deba drove tepun sumla solwa de Jancho tula nganye sirlimpa shinda chembe solzi marmeze Lamsa sezen tumba rimpoche tembe sokshin sumla solwa de tembe sokshin sumla solwa de Mawa dame drenjo shaketo gyawe kenra kundu jambe yam Samu tunse pakcho ludru sha mawe tsugen sumla solwa de pakpe gomba selze dawa tra tese tuwo rikpe kucho che gyase rikpe kucho nibe sha rikpe wangcho sumla solwa de rikpe wangcho sumla sowa de Tendre samu chishin sikpa ye shinda chimbo sezi marmeze lamsa seze tumba rimpoche zamling gingyur nila solwa de Nelchura wanjo palden gompa pa samu tinzin tembe neusurpa duwe deno kunzin tamapa tako drume sumla sowa de Takoba drume sumla sowa de tsumbe druba lurlen namsen sham tambe jila namka gyabo dang jikten chege pangbe senge sang gyase sambe shabla solwa de chancho toge drogun pushin se alhakpe alhaye jesun chinge lam Nikto drove drembe shenyen cho namka gyanzen shabla solwa de namka gyanzen shabla solwa de gyawe dungsa shenyen poto wa namcho drenda trawe sharawa chancho toge kagaw chekapa drove rekun sumla solwa de drove rekun sumla Lungdo ngada janse chibu pa time lungge wangcho kebe cho kamson drove gombo rimpoche neden chimbe sumla solwa de neden chimbe sumla sowa de namda tsulti ngedan sangchen pa duwa bumde ngada tsona pa chung gyatso tarsu mendra pa drove drimba Sumla solwa de sabjin gyache chela nganye pe kalden drowa kungi kyapsu gyur chingle sambo temba geze pa pande lame shabla solwa de drube wangju chembo tsudrimbar shenye tsushin tenze shunu Tekcho lamgi gyuchans Gyawe sebo sumla solwade, Gyawe sebo sumla solwade, Mejun yunden zunzin sangyewen, Dambe chinla neka gyabo dang, Jikden chuge pangbe senge sang, Gyase sangbe shabla solwade, Gyase sangbe shabla Chancho toge drogo pushin se, Lakbe lai jeson chinge lap, Nikto drowa drembe shenyen cho namka gyansen shabla solwade namka gyansen shabla solwade mingme tsewe terchen chenre ze drime kembe wangbo chambe liang kanche kebe tsuken tsonga pa trabe shabla solwade losan trab Drube wanjo chambe gyatso dan kedro mawe nima gelepe Ningyo dambe zunzin paseje Dame lama sumla sowade Dame lama sumla solwade Songjo kunye chuge dorje dan Kusung ungyur gyawa ensapa Longto ngada sange se shesha Kedro chimbo sumla solwade Kedru chimbu sumla sowa de losan chege gyansen zimbeje Teye tukse gonjo gyansen sham Lamsa seze losan yeshe te Jetsun lama sumla solwa de Tupten peze ngawan chamba dan Teye tukse losan nyendra sham Gyatso tabu yunten taye nga Trinchen lama sumla sowa de losan yeshe temba rabge je Lodro sambo drogun namdro de Losan gyawe chutsu Tsungme lama sumla solwa de Tsungme lama sumla solwa de Kelsan namdren shiwe lungdo ten shedru nigi zinla datrewa Kadri nyangme tsawe lama la gosung kupa chimbu solwa de Chimbu sowa de mangdo tamba sharwe kilgurge rimni chebe rida sunye se Kelsan duche munse kunde nye tenzin kedru shabla solwa Tenzin kedru shabla sowa de tusun kemne malu dube ko losan jam lekshe druge son lapson gyudre lundro gyatso tu tinchen trube kula solwa de chamba tsulden laso pagnorgi Tugyo lektam gyalten zimbe tso namshi trinle gyatso gochen kyun Yongya jetsun lamra solwa de Yongkyaba jetsun lamra sowa Losan gyawa kunge yeshe ni Chigdu trime gyalten zimbe tso Ramjan kilkor gyatso trudu Trinchen lame shabla solwa Shabla sowa de locho sambo pagyu trashi pa Tuche tembe trinle yarngoda Pege drolo zambe zebara chen Pande lame shabla solwa de Pande lame shabla solwa de Ramjan sonrawa kunla tawe mi Kelsan tarbara drebe jungo chom Sewe köbe tapke zebayi senze shenye namla solwa de pande lame namda tarbala keche tsamya lokta mike shim chitze lekpra tongwe mögögi lame chenla semla jukpra sho lame chenla semla jukpar sho. Richiesta di benedizione per realizzare ognuno dei passi nel sentiero graduale all'illuminazione. Yende kunge shigye trinjenje tsushin temba lamge tsawaru lekpra tongne beba tumayi kuba chimbe tembra chingelo lenche nyebe dawe tensandi shindu nyeka tunchen shigyurune Ninsen kundu nimba lembe lo, gyunche meba kewra chinge lo, gyunche mebra kewra chinge lo, loso yowa chui chubru shin, nyurdu jikpe chiwa dremba dam, shiwe jesu ludan, karna ledre chishin changwa la, ngeba tembo nyene nyebe tso trashi trawa namkyang pongwa dam, getso tada druba cheba la, takto pakdan dembra chingelo, takto pakdan dembra chingelo, chebe mingo dunga kunge go, yide miron sibe punsogi, nyemi ringne tarpe dewa la, tuenye chembor kewra chingelo, tuenye chembro kewra. Namda samba teyi changba yi, trinda shishin payo chimbo yi, tembe tsawa sosro tarba la, druba nimbo chebra jingelo, druba nimbro chebra jingelo, rangi sitso longwa chishin tu, magyuro drowa kuingya tedra war, tongne drowa trolwe kurkerwe, jancho semcho jombra jingelo, Chancho semchon chombra jinge lo semsan kekya tsutrin namso la komba mena chancho midru para lekpara tongne gyase domba la tsumba chakpo lobra jinge lo tsumba chakpo lobra jinge lo lokpe yula yenwa shiche chim yangda tenla tsushin chepa yi shine lakto sundu drewe lam Nyurdu gyula kevra chingelo, nyurdu gyula kev. Tumo lamja nudu gyurba na tekpa kungi chogyo dorjete. Kesan kewo jungo tamba ter, dela nidu chukpra chingelo, dela nidu chukpra chingelo, tetse ngodro namni drube shin. Namda tamsi domba sungwa la, chema mimbe ngeba nyegyurne, Sogdan döde songra chingelo, sogda döde songra chingelo, tene gyöde nimbo rimnigi, nenam jishin tongne tsumbayi, tunshin eljura chöle miye wara, tambe songshin drubra chingelo, drubra chingelo, tedra lamsan töbe shenyen dan, tsushin drube drona shabden chin, Chida nange parto chepetso, nyevra shivra chinge labdo so, nyevra shivra chinge labdo so, kewa kunto yanda lama dan, drame cheke pela longche chim. Dorje change kopa nyurto sho, dorje change kopa nyurto sho. Offerta del Mandala come richiesta per ricevere gli insegnamenti. Sashi peki choshime tamare rabalingashi ni de again padi sange shinto mikte ulwarki drokunamda shinla che parasho jetsulame kutserapte chinam karachile chochuye padam Mindrala Kamniri Tayami. Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Nell'arco dei secoli,
During the centuries, when we observe the passage that has happened gradually, generation after generation, until us today, of what Buddha transmitted, one of the aspects that we could define more traditional, that defines the tradition itself, has been the capacity of adaptation. Sometimes we start from this idea that the tradition means to maintain things as they were. This is traditional in the sense that it's done in the same way that it was done before. And when we go and check in what way it was done, now today inside of the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, do we still read things in Sanskrit or Pali in Tibet? No. Are sutras used as daily use texts? No, not even. So what happened was that at a certain point it went into another culture, and the language was adapted, the needs, it was adapted to the needs to the capacity of comprehension. For example, many of the sutras were transmitted and taught and taught in a way that for the majority of us today we will understand little. And also when we study the various texts, one of the ways when we study a text to do it is to first, before getting into the details of the text, in Tibetan you would say, you would ask to whom that text was transmitted, because also if you go and listen to someone talking, or if you go and read a book, it's important to understand to whom it was said, that for whom it was written, that book, because according to the person, the way, the language is different, it transforms itself. And so when the people that need to receive it change, also inevitably the way that it is expressed changes. And so I think that more or less since 2500 years ago in India, and now we have changed a little bit, you know, like the language, the cultural context, the words used, many things have changed. On the other side, some fundamental characteristics of the human beings have remained the same. So when Buddha was talking about of the problems, of the fundamental problems that generate suffering, and we go and look at them today, they are still completely actual. When also he talks about the antidotes, they are also completely relevant today. So the beauty of the tradition is the capacity to adapt it also to the culture, the language, but having a special care to not lose the boundary, the bound, and and the way that it was transmitted, the profundity. For me, one of the important things is that when we take some teachings, when yes, we can use the term also teachings themselves, the path is not about a path of knowledge. The teaching is not a path made out of getting to know new concepts, learning to do new things, learning prayers and study some particular things conceptually. The path is made out of a process that is inner, of development of certain states of consciousness. What are the inner qualities that we need to develop? So Buddha Shakyamuni developed a path of these qualities, and then subsequently this was gradually maintained, adapting it to the necessity and the capacity of each one. And so what we are doing during this path that we have called together on the path has been to take the same basis, the same order of transmission of concepts and states of consciousness that need to be generated, and to adapt them to our way of today in order to be able to generate them.
Ok, venite, venite ragazzi. Questo è il saluto alla tibetana, venite di qua, di qua. Grazie e benvenuti. Sì, come no? Se volete fare una foto, con piacere.
Venite qua, avvicinatevi di qua, facciamo qualcosa, almeno siamo insieme, così ci rimane questo ricordo. Eccoci qua. Ok, perfetto. Grazie mille e benvenuti sempre. Grazie a voi. Perciò questi ragazzi sono venuti a salutare, a trovare.
These guys have come here to visit the center. They're from the jail of Verbania. They came to visit the temple and to say hi to us. What happens is that we very often, during our lives, we are trapped in the habits of our daily life. We have problems that need to be solved. We have to try, and we do at our best try to live the pleasures of life, and somehow life is just developed, it goes on. What Buddha transmitted, and after this there is the whole process of Lama Tsongkhapa, what we actually call the path. It's a bit like the path of, okay, let's try a bit to get out of this automatic way of going about daily life, and let's try to see life itself as an opportunity and as a tool to develop some characteristics that help us to feel better, to be in a balance with ourselves and with the others. Because at the end, when we go and check the problems of the world, the conflicts, wars, but also starting from the families and so on, start inside of us. They don't start out because of outside situations. And so this path, if we actually had to simplify it as much as possible, we, as Lama Tsongkhapa did, it's condensed in three fundamental points that are loving oneself, and inside of loving oneself we have the development of the capacity of cultivating what is good for oneself and abandoning what is harmful. The next step is to love the others, comprehending also that egoistically speaking is better to be altruistic, being able to transcend our own obsession with self-gratification and to really open the heart to the others, to be able to learn to see the other. And then the third point is to develop a coherent vision of reality, the so-called correct view of reality. That is the basis, the most powerful tool to help ourselves to cut from the root the attachment, the envy, jealousy, hatred, and so on. So this path is based on these three fundamental points. But there is one point that is, before starting a path, we have no hurry of getting right away to the highest levels. We have to start from where we are. And one of the very interesting things is that it's described that the basis of our path is the human contact, is the human relationship. And this is a part of the teachings that very often has remained a bit, how can we say,
trascurata non è il termine giusto, ma in Occidente,
in the West, but not in the East, this part of the teachings very often has been a bit like put aside. Yeah, you explain it afterwards. I also seen it recently, a list of the various meditations of the gradual path, very valid, well made for the West, where the first point is placed at the last, as the last. That is relying correctly upon the spiritual guide, and this has been placed afterwards because there is the danger that we comprehend it as if here I am in this moment of in the position of having to share, to teach, transmit, as if I was saying that you should have like a certain kind of relation towards me, treat me in a certain way, see me in a certain way, and so on. And when I decided to give these teachings and to share this path with you, I also decided to say no, I want to follow the tradition, but getting to the essence, understanding also why. When we say that the first point of the path is to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide, what it shows us is that at the basis of a profound path there is trust, and it's a human relationship. Let's imagine that we go to the doctor. I don't know. What happens if one has like a quite serious disease? One goes to the doctor and doesn't he have trust in that doctor? Does he follow the treatment? Badly. Yes, a bit no, let's see. But the basis to follow a treatment well is first of all to have trust. And trust is about different aspects. So I go to a doctor, I personally need that to have trust in the medicine that doctor uses. So if I go to a homeopathist, I need to have trust in that. If I go to a Chinese medicine doctor, doesn't matter what kind of doctor, I must have trust in the type of medicine that doctor uses. I should have trust in the knowledge that doctor has of that medicine, of his experience. And for me it's fundamental to have trust that doctor, that person cares about me. To me it has happened to find myself in front of a doctor where I didn't feel that person had actually interest in my health status, and so I say goodbye and not see you again. In the sense, I look for someone else. But it was strange at that time because I went to a doctor for a very specific problem, and he gave me some treatments and he told me some things. I didn't like the approach because I didn't feel like I was seen. Nothing against the doctor, but it was my problem. I didn't follow the treatment. The problem went away. We never went away, so somehow it worked. But anyway, the point is that when we go to a doctor, in order for the treatment to work, even more when it's a long treatment. Because if I have a chronic disease and I need to follow a treatment, a process of healing that lasts years, then I need to have trust. So I repeat, trust in the medicine that is used, trust in the knowledge on the side of the doctor, and trust in the love and compassion that person has towards me, in the sense that he or she cares about my state of health. So when we talk about a spiritual path, we're not talking about a path of learning some techniques or a path of developing knowledge on a specific philosophy or something like this. This can also be done and it's beautiful, everything is fine, but actually here we're talking about a path of being able to walk together to face one's own shadows, the so-called mental defilements, to gradually be able to develop one's own qualities like love towards oneself, like trust, generosity, morality, patience, up to wisdom. And this is a process that is not simple and even less easy. Like there was a disciple, a guy in Brazil. He came to me, look, I have a profound gratitude towards you, And but there is a point that just stays there, and I said, okay, what is it that didn't went well? When I started to follow the teachings, I felt that everything was wonderful, but he never told me that it was so difficult. I also never said that it was easy, because concepts by themselves are not complicated, but looking each other in the eyes and to change one's own deepest habits up to changing our own paradigm is not simple. It demands a total dedication, and it's possible. But in order to do that, the first starting point is trust. And so, for this, the path towards enlightenment, the so-called stages of the path, at the beginning is divided in two parts. How to rely correctly upon the spiritual guide, and once having relied correctly, how to follow the path. It's a bit like saying, following the analogy of before, how to find the right doctor and to develop a relationship of trust with the doctor, and once having found and relied upon the correct doctor, what is the process of healing to be followed. But the first step is this. And it's very interesting for me to see that in our society, in the world in general, one of the most important points that makes it so that everything works is trust. I don't know. I get into a taxi. Do I need to have trust on the taxi driver? I have trust that he or she knows how to drive. I say, I need to go there. I have trust that he or she brings me to that place. I go to the restaurant, I order some food. What is the basis to say I order this? I need to have trust that what is written and that what they bring me, that there is coherence between them, that they bring me food done in a certain way. Whatever we do at the basis of that, there is trust. When trust is lacking, everything else becomes very difficult. It comes to my mind also when I did the work of construction of this temple with the various companies, the various artisans with which we worked. One of the fundamental points was to look at each other in the eyes, take each other hands. Okay, this is the work that needs to be done. There is an agreement between us, and then in the office they will do contracts and those useless things. But because contracts you need them when things don't work, or else at least I see things this way. Nothing against people who do contracts, because also they are necessary. Things don't always go well, but at the basis, what do we need? Trust. We look at each other in the eyes. We have trust in each other, and when there is someone that is maybe a lumber or like a plumber or whoever does like some work in the temple, the relationship of trust that I developed was not only the trust that, okay, I pay you this and you do that job. I also wanted the trust that, fortunately, I found people that I could trust and that they could care about what they were doing, and that they tried to do the best to make it in the best way. And I had trust, for example, that there were people that wanted to work in harmony between them. It was one of the characteristics. In the process of working on the temple, there was only one discussion at the beginning between an artisan and a technician. And the first day, I stopped the technician and I told him, this doesn't happen. If you talk to each other with respect, then it's fine. We can discuss whatever, but in this construction place, then I don't want to see conflicts and I can find another technician. Then things started out well, but one of the aspects of trust was for me that there needed to be a certain way of working and of respect one towards the other, and this was important for me, but like this in everything. And even more when we need to face something that is deep. Our spiritual path, one of the fundamental aspects is that if I find myself in front of someone that guides me spiritually, I need to allow myself to be myself, both with myself and with who guides me. And here there is also a level of trust, that is the trust of not being judged, the trust of being loved, of being seen, and so on. And what happens, and that is the most interesting part, is that when we get into the process of developing this trust, there are two parts. One is about finding a person or more people that have the characteristics that are right, so that I can rely upon them on this path. And another part is the development of trust in myself, that I am able to follow this path. Because the two things go together. And there is also the part, how can I say, when I find myself in front of someone and I allow myself to be myself without the fear of the judgment. This requires, on the other side, that I can allow myself to be myself other than being with the other. I don't know if this is clear. And all of this is part of this path. And here, before getting into the details, there is a fundamental point that at really the beginning, it is said that it was already faced before. That is that these qualities, for example, trust on someone or more people, beings that guide us on the path, and all the stages that come after that, the awareness of the preciousness of this life, the awareness of impermanence, love towards ourselves, the trust in a law of karma or anything else, are all aspects that don't come in an automatic way. It's just not necessary to understand. We need to familiarize ourselves. It's something where one, bit by bit, needs to develop trust. It's not like something, I have understood, done, let's go forward. No, it's something that needs to be generated with time. It's like a friendship. We can get to know a person. There is the first moment where we see each other. I like you, everything is nice. It was like a nice approach. But from here to having a deep trust, how much time does it need to pass? It depends. Sometimes it's a sort of falling in love, where one totally falls in love and has a complete trust. But in order to have a trust in the other, there are also the difficulties and the crisis moments don't destroy it. Usually one needs some time. It's not an immediate thing. The path to do this is a path of familiarization. And the term that often is translated as meditation. Because if I generate a certain inner state that I need to get used to and to familiarize myself with that inner state, so that then it comes in a spontaneous and natural way. And for this, each one of the steps of this path is divided into two parts. How to practice during the sessions of meditation, and how to practice between the sessions of meditation, that is, outside the moment of meditation. We have already seen the first part of relying correctly upon a spiritual guide, and we got into the part where it divided into parts. That is, how to practice in the session of meditation and outside. And in the part of how to practice inside the session is also important, because it's the moment where one places full attention on an inner state that is generated in a non-spontaneous way. Then, bit by bit, it becomes spontaneous, but at the beginning it's not. So if we talk about trust, it's something where that trust doesn't come so spontaneous right away, but I go and do a process of reflection, so that feeling becomes stronger inside of myself, and then I familiarize with it. one of the most clear examples is the certainty of death. If I asked you now, will you die or not? Are you sure? Yes, right? So no one here has a doubt like, I don't know if I will die or not. But this certainty of death, is it present in our daily life? Strangely, we live as if we were immortal inside of our own mortality. So, what lacks, for example, about the certainty of death is what in Tibetan is called Pakyu, that is translated as being conscious of the certainty of death. That is a bit like being aware of what one already knows. The lack of conscientiousness is that, okay, I know that I will die, but that is not present in my thoughts, in my choices, in my daily life. It's something that I know, but somehow I forget. And so, to bring presence, to bring in the present moment that knowledge, in a way, so to speak, that is aware, conscientious, that is being conscious of it. Because something is, okay, to know that it's important to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide, and here there is a process of developing gratitude and respect, but it doesn't come spontaneous right away. It's something that we need to cultivate. And in order to do this, we do it in a moment of meditation, and then you also do it outside of meditation. And to do it inside of the meditation, there are those that are called the preliminary practices that we have already seen in the previous times. So when we start to meditate, how is it done? Prepare the place, sit in the right posture, prepare the mental state, love towards oneself, love towards the others, take of refuge, generation of bodhicitta, generation of the field of merit, do the 7 limb prayers and request blessings. These are the various steps that we have seen until now. If I remember well, now we have got to the part where after having done the 7 limbs prayer, there is the moment where we request the blessings. And so the preliminary practices that we've already seen, so we will not repeat them, because otherwise we remain repeating the same things, which also partly is fine. As long as one doesn't realize them, we can also stay there, but slowly we go forward. And it's something that I invite you also to listen to again, to read about it, to practice it, and to create this experience. That is very important. We get now into the moment of the effective practice. I will take the book of Paponka Rinpoche to follow the writing more than anything else. This should be at the end of the 7th day. Let's see.
Ok. Perciò, brevemente,
Briefly, during preliminary practices in meditation, one of the tools that are more used is visualization. Because when we imagine something, it's as if we were living it. We have seen that when we talk about visualizing, it's not like to put like a drawn image in our mind, but to imagine, to be in the presence of the being, of living that, of being in that experience. And we visualize in front of us the image of Guru Buddha. There is a very complex visualization of the so-called merit field that we have seen briefly. And then there is the very simplified one, and we've said, okay, let's remain on the simplified one. Then who has the capacity of visualizing and wants to get into more details and want to extend oneself. In the book of Pabonka Rinpoche, there is that, is perfectly described in the minimum details. So also for this I decided to not get into the description here, because I think that for the majority of us is more suitable to just visualize one simple image, but who wants to get into more details can read the details. So in this moment, after having done the 7 limbs prayer, after having made the mandala offering, requesting the blessings, at this point we imagine that Guru Buddha comes towards us and sits upon our crown. And from this moment on is when we receive the part of the blessings and we meditate on each one of the stages of the path. The request of the blessings is made in a specific way and not generalized. And so I request the blessings to be able to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide. So I imagine that from the 5 chakras of Guru Buddha, rays of light are emanated, and because he's sitting on my head, the rays of color white, red, blue, yellow and green go forward and then get into my chakras, and then gradually they clean, they purify, cleanse any internal blockage that there may be in general, but specifically for also being able to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide. So what is it that blocks me? The lack of trust, the lack of trust in myself, the lack of trust in the other, uncertainty, aversion maybe towards the spiritual guide. That is a classic thing, like I felt a bit like badly for one thing or the other, so there is something small little blockages that block our capacity of totally relying, of totally trusting, and so they needs to be purified. And so we imagine that these rays of light also fill our body with some nectar, and that slowly, bit by bit, we generate that inner state of trust, of love, and this pure connection that we generate. While doing this, there are 2 types of meditation that are called in Tibetan Chegom and Jogom. Chegom is the meditation, analytical meditation. And then there is the unidirectional meditation. The analytical meditation is our path, inner path of reflecting upon something in order to get closer ourselves to that state of consciousness and that feeling. Pabonka Rinpoche describes also this type of analytical meditation, saying that we very often do these analytical meditations.
Noi molto spesso facciamo meditazione analitica in un modo così spontaneo.
In a way, do these analytical meditations in a way that is spontaneous. For example, I could start by talking of an argument that for many maybe is like something, an argument of aversion, for example politics, and we can take some specific arguments, subjects. So it's quite easy to take like a subject where it's easy to induce the other to hatred, and we can do this with the other but also with ourselves, and we talk and say, look, that person has done this, say that, how does he dare to do this, and we get into an inner dialogue that takes us to feel hatred, rancor, whatever. We are doing an analytical meditation to generate anger. The word meditation, actually the more correct translation would be familiarization. So there is a process of a dialogue, an inner analytical dialogue of following a path of reasoning that brings us to generate a certain type of feeling. Pabonka Rinpoche described it, okay, like imagine an object of strong desire. could be whatever. Money, food, a person, a type of situation. Think about something for which you have a lot of attachment, a lot of attraction. What happens if one starts to describe that object and to talk about how that thing is so good because here and there, and to imagine the various aspects? What happens to that feeling of attachment? It increases, it arises, and it becomes very strong. That is an analytical meditation on attachment. And so whatever type of feeling that we have, there is an analytical process of a narrative, an inner narrative that could also be verbalized, that when we take that path of reasoning and so on, it increases that feeling and that inner state. That would be the process of familiarization on the basis of an analytical meditation. And so instead of doing it on the negative things, we use it on the positive things. And so what happens is that it's a bit like that sentence that I've said sometimes that seems like a joke, but it's actually very serious. So that it's better to be an artificial altruistic person rather than a natural selfish person. There is a fundamental difference between being artificial and being fake. One is fake when one manifests to the world an aspect that he doesn't feel, that he wants to be seen in that way from the world but also from himself. So I can manifest like as a kind person when actually I don't have any kindness. Then I'm fake, and this is harmful. Another aspect is kindness in that context doesn't come natural to me, it doesn't come spontaneous, but I manage through an inner process, through a narrative that I create for myself to generate a sincere feeling of kindness that is not spontaneous but is artificial because I had to make some effort to create a narrative to be able to access to that kindness and to generate, but it's true, it's sincere, and it's by generating that kindness in an artificial way 1, 2, 10, 20, 30 times, bit by bit, then it becomes spontaneous. And the same thing is also on the negative side. So I open a quick and close a quick parenthesis. We should really be careful to our way of talking, because our mind works through our words, through our dialogues, our narratives. And when we have an unhealthy narrative and we criticize and we blame, naturally that gradually brings us to familiarize ourselves with that thought. Last evening, as I was talking, came to my mind one thing to make an example. There was like this person that every time that I would say good morning, I would say hi a bit like in the Brazilian way. Instead of asking how are you, you say is everything well? Is all well? And by asking that, every time that I would say that, that person would start making like a list of the problems. No, because look here, because there is this and that. And really, I didn't want to face every time that long list of things. So one day I had an idea, good morning, and said, is all bad? That person looked at me and he said, no, not all bad. Okay, oh great. But if we observe in the question, is all well, where does my mind go? In looking what is good or what is bad? And actually, in when I ask, is all bad, then my mind goes to check what is not bad. And so these other things are good. And it's interesting how some small words, some small sentences that we use direct our mind in a way rather than the other. And once that we have taken that route, we get used to it. It's like neuronal paths that once that you've taken them, then it's difficult to take another path. We are made out of habits, and our path of transformation is a path of creating new habits. And so, during this process of creating new habits, this is divided into two parts: the analytical part, the narrative part, where I get into an analytical process of a narrative and where I generate a certain inner state. So we could also say, is it all well? Then I put myself to do an analytical meditation to see that it's not all bad, and I train myself to see also the good things. When I come to the conclusion that, look, it's not all bad, there is this and that that are good, and I generate that inner state to say, how beautiful, there are these aspects that are actually good, and I rejoice, I feel the joy for them. Then at that point, I can get into an unidirectional meditation that is to remain without any other thoughts into that state, and that helps me even more to familiarize with that state. By using the opposite example, it's a bit like if one starts to talk towards oneself or also with the others of a situation that is an object of anger, and at a certain point it generates a strong feeling of anger, and he remains blocked into that anger and is not able to think about anything else. We could say that to remain blocked without thinking about anything else, if not that feeling of anger, is the unidirectional meditation, and the previous one is the analytical meditation. So the process that we will now see is the process of what is the narrative that we create for ourselves to get into, to generate a deep feeling of trust. Let's remember at the start, at the beginning, what we have already faced some times ago. Before I am able to rely upon a spiritual guide, I need to make experience, I need to see, I need to check, I need to make sure that that person has the right characteristics to guide me in what I want. And there is a fundamental point also in this, that is, when I trust on, when I rely upon someone as a spiritual guide, that as as the basis of that, there is the thing that I want to follow a spiritual path. It's not like, okay, that person is nice, I want to be close to that person. Because otherwise it's a bit like the example, there is a person that I really like and I feel good next to that person. He is a good dentist. Maybe he has tremendous problems to his teeth, and I could out with him to eat pizza, but he has terrible teeth, and but he is a very nice person. But anyway, I don't go to him to treat my teeth, but I relied upon him as a friend, not as a dentist. So when we talk about relying upon someone as a spiritual guide, it starts from the fact that I want to take that path, because I believe that all of us have already passed the experience of wanting to help someone, and that person doesn't to give like an advice to a person that doesn't want to follow that advice. That is pointless. Also in Brazil, we say the saint in his own house doesn't make miracles. But the concept is that in general, very often the person that we are very close to, we are not able to help that person. And then someone comes and says the same thing that we have said for 20 years, and then he says, look what he has told me. But that person was not open with us to be able to understand or to ask help about that thing. And one of the most important points to be able to receive is to ask. If I don't ask help about something, for as much that person can try to give me help on that, then I am not able to receive it. And so if I give some advice to someone for 20 years and the person doesn't listen to me, it's not because I gave the wrong advice and the person doesn't take me into consideration, but it's because that person never asked me that. And the day that that person asks some help to someone else and says the same thing, then it works. Why? Because he or she asked. So when we talk about relying upon a spiritual guide, it starts out of the assumption that I want. And today it came to my mind when this man from the jail came. Once I went to Thailand, and every time that I will go to Thailand, in Bangkok, there is this huge monastery called Dhammakaya. They are not big, like huge organization. A few years when I was there, they made me like a tour of their center. There is literally enormous. And talking like this, how many members do you have? Associated members registered. We're like 4.5 million. They're really huge. They were one of the first centers to teach the more specific aspects of meditation to laymen. They are doing a really beautiful job. And once that I went with Lama Ganchen, we had this moment where we had like a private meeting with the second Habut that was also here with us to give teachings, one of the most beautiful persons that I've ever met. And once I get to him to say hi, it was always a beautiful moment. And he looks at me and he says, "Look, we need to understand that we actually are in jail. We are in prison. Okay? I know this analogy in the teachings." And he repeated this. It's not to understand, but it's to really feel it. That we are imprisoned by our own mental defilements, by our own unhealthy dynamics. We are trapped by our jealousy, by our obsession with self-gratification, by anger, attachment, envy, and all the actions that we make on these mental defilements and all the cycles that we create. We are trapped by this. But what happens is that if I don't have memory of not being in prison, and then I also like the soup of the Wednesday, and I made some friends, then as long as I don't have the total conviction that I want to get out of it, I will never do the required effort to get out of it. I don't know if this is clear. And as long as I don't have that strong wish, okay, I don't want this anymore, I don't want to deal with this anymore, but really until like something really deep inside of us comes, then we will not put the effort to change, because we are trapped in dynamics that are deep inside of us, in habits that are deep. We are trapped inside of a paradigm that is unhealthy on many aspects, and to get out of this requires effort. And so one of the main starting points is to be able to see that I find myself trapped, and I tell myself, I don't want this anymore. It comes to my mind this friend that once, as we were talking, she says, look, I have a problem with my partner on work, and I knew both of them well. And then I asked her, have you ever felt like that before? And she says, yes. Actually, my parents never recognized me, never gave value to what I do. My husband also never gave value to what I do. My children never gave value. And also my partner is not giving value to what I do. What is there in common between all of this? And she replies that no one gives value to what I do. Okay, let's look for something else in common. between parents, friends, children, partner. Who is there in common? Herself. And what happens is that we are trapped in our own dynamics. Wherever we go, we bring them with ourselves constantly. And so there is one place where it's necessary to be able to recognize and say, I don't want to be like this anymore. But to get out of it, I need someone that at least has a little bit more experience than me, that has at least made a few more steps in relationship to that thing, so that he or she can help me, and that there is a possible path in this way, in this direction. And that is where we rely upon a spiritual guide. That is where we get into, okay, I want to get out of this. And then as we go forward, as we proceed, then we understand and feel, and we get deeper into this feeling. And so it's also like not relying upon an external reality, but it's relying upon an inner reality. I want to change the way that I relate to the world, and I want to change the world. Otherwise, I will live in a loop where I do everything possible to try to change a situation, and then after a while it comes back in the same precise way. I don't know how many of you had some experiences like this. And like this, it just goes on and on. Then the bad news is that one dies, and then he repeats them. Then he's born again, and he repeats again in that loop until he is able to change the habits. And so there is one point where one says, enough, I can't deal with it anymore. Sometimes
stare, questa cosa è di più del non ce la faccio più, qualcosa di più profondo. Dire basta. Ed è qua che io trovo.
it is here where I find some light, and I can say, okay, I want to follow this. Because when we are able to find someone that has trust in ourselves, where we don't have trust ourselves actually, and we are able to feel that love, that trust, that helps us to have trust in ourselves and to have love towards ourselves. When we allow ourselves to be loved without judgment, that allows us to love ourselves without judgment. So during this process, the first part that we've already faced previously is where we really look for one or more persons that we can trust during this process. Someone that has the knowledge, someone that has the experience, that puts in practice what he or she transmits, that at least he or she has some more qualities than me on that side. Someone from which I feel loved and that doesn't judge me, from which I don't feel judged. These are some of the important qualities. And once I have found that person, and this is not immediate, traditionally in the history, before relying really upon someone as a spiritual guide, one should have like something like 12 years of experience together. And these 12 years are not like strictly that I have to be like that, so the one counts with the watch. After 12 years I can't take refuge. It's not that. It's to say that it's a path that takes time, and we should also allow ourselves this time, because it's also not like, it's not something that we joke about, something serious. And once I've found someone to rely upon, that I need to cultivate this feeling, and this is the point of the practice where we have got to. So I have one or more people upon which I rely, and let's remember that this also doesn't mean I take refuge on you, so you do things for me on my side. No, it's that you show me the path that I need to follow. When we go talk doctor, it's not that the doctor can heal us. He can give us a correct diagnosis and to give us treatment that we should follow. The same thing happens in the spiritual path. And so now we go and see the points let's remember that they are like an inner narrative that one creates to generate and induce inside oneself this strong feeling of trust.
Perciò siamo arrivati al punto che fa riferimento il metodo per condurre i discepoli
So we have got to the method of leading disciples.
il fondamento del sentiero e qua viene fatta una traduzione che è la devozione alla guida spirituale e secondo me non è il termine più giusto.
Here there is used the word devotion to the spiritual guide that I think is not the right term, because by devotion it seems that one needs to have the devotional aspect. No, devotion intended as respect and gratitude is something that is developed as a support and also as a result somehow to the deep feeling of trust. So the more correct way would be to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide in the deep sense of having trust. And so this is the foundation of the path, relying correctly upon a spiritual guide. And then having relied correctly upon a spiritual guide, I had to practice the stages of the mental training. So we start from the first one. This is the foundation of the path. Something needs to be said here. The part of the meditation of the preliminary practices is the same for all the points that come after this. So when one wants to meditate on impermanence, on the preciousness of life, the part of the preliminaries is the same. So we have Guru Buddha on our head that grants us the blessings. Then what changes is the analytical meditation, the unidirectional meditation. And so now we get into the part of the analytical meditation that, I repeat once again, is a bit like this narrative that we create to generate this inner feeling. So the foundation of the path, to rely correctly upon the spiritual guide. This part of relying correctly upon a spiritual guide is divided in 4 parts. The advantages of relying upon a spiritual guide, the disadvantages of not relying upon a spiritual guide, and the disadvantages of relying in an improper way on a spiritual guide. The third point, how to rely upon a spiritual guide through the thoughts, so the process of developing this trust through our thoughts, and how to rely upon a spiritual guide through the actions, that is in the daily life and the way of relating with the spiritual guide. The advantages of relying correctly upon a spiritual guide. And here it's interesting because the teachings themselves are based on a principle that we have as a foundation, that is for everything that we want to do, so that we can develop the wish towards that thing. There are 3 types of incentives. There are only 3 types of incentives for us to do it. There are the benefits of doing it, the disadvantages of not doing it, and moral matters. So in general, if we want to do whatever, in order to generate the wish toward the desire towards that, it's important to understand what are the benefits, the disadvantages of not doing it, and to generate also like a commitment, a moral matter. And here it follows exactly the same thing. So first of all, there are the advantages. So first of all, why should I rely upon a spiritual guide? What are the benefits? They are described as the following. You will come closer to Buddhahood. There are various ways here Paponka Rinpoche chooses to follow the teachings of these other Rinpoches that created two divisions. You will come closer to Buddhahood by practicing the instructions that he taught you, and secondly, you will also come closer to Buddhahood by making offerings to the Guru and serving him. The fundamental point is the following. What does it mean that we get closer to Buddhahood? It's not that from the moment that I rely upon someone spiritually, then that was already enough and then everything else becomes automatic. What happens is this. From the moment that I create a deep relationship of trust with someone that has the qualities that I want to develop, that has a correct way of guiding me, naturally I start to walk in that direction. We are beings that allow ourselves to be influenced, and so to be close to someone that has a sane way of being. Naturally, that helps us to be more sane, to get close to someone and to have trust on someone that has an unhealthy way of going about things. That helps us to get more close to that. So the first benefit, the first characteristic that I see is that when I rely upon someone as a spiritual guide, first of all, I have what in English is called a role model, an example of life. And very often during our lives as we go on, we try to find someone as a point of reference. I remember when I was a kid, I would go to school in Brazil, and it was something that I would see as normal in kids to have their idols that would put like some posters of the singers or of the football players or of the stars of the movies. And I looked at this and was like, I don't find any meaning in this. Maybe I put the poster of Milarepa, of Lama Tsongkhapa, because the idol is someone that you should follow. There is an example of life. But what I want to say is that naturally we look for some examples to be followed. This is something natural inside of us. And when we have some healthy examples, then that helps us to take that path, to walk on that path. When we don't have any sane examples, and then we look for examples anyway, and eventually we find unhealthy examples. I'm not saying that singers or football players are an unhealthy example. I'm not saying this. But maybe we take the example of success, power, money, fame, beauty, and so on, don't we? So what happens, we can also just see the dynamic of social media. Now there is the category of the influencers. It is also funny to see by having put some videos online. Sometimes one that is out of the context of the center is, he says, you have a lot of followers. And originally, a spiritual guide, when you say that you have someone following you, it's a totally different context. But this gives the idea, like we have the people that we call the influencers, people that you say, I do this, and the others also feel like doing that. And then there is an aspect also that leaves me perplexed. There is a person that has an influence on a lot of other people also lives out of this. So I am paid for putting on a certain cloth or using a certain product so that also other people follows it. But am I showing you that because I really believe in that, or because I have a personal benefit? Am I offering you something, or am I taking something from you? In other words. But this is just to say how much we need to have some people to follow. This is something normal in life. We're not talking about something that is outside our reality. we can take the life of practically everyone, to not say literally everyone. Do we have some examples to follow? Do we have some points of reference or not? I think so, yes. But when I have an example that starts from someone that loves me, and then I have trust that what that person does is at the best of his capacities or her capacities for my well-being. I have trust in the fact that that person loves me. So this means that everything that that person will do towards me, in his or her vision, he or she is doing what he thinks that is the best for me, which also doesn't always match with what I think. For me, it has also happened with Lama Rinpoche that he had said or done something towards me that in that moment I didn't understand them. But for my great luck, then with time, then it always made sense. And then I would always say, yes, he was right. But at the basis, I never had any doubt in the fact that he loved me. This is one of the fundamental points. When I trust someone in this way to be close mentally, through words and through the body, and so in this interaction, helps me also to get in touch with that part that the other has and that I want to develop. And so when we rely upon someone as a spiritual guide, we rely upon someone who has the right qualities, and one of the benefits that are there is that we receive a sane influence, and this influence gives us a good direction in life. It's strange to say it, but are really few those that have the capacity of teaching by themselves. Usually, what do we do? Of dreaming, not teachings. Usually, we follow the dreams of the others. I don't know if this is clear. What do we want? What are our own desires? What do we want in life? It's difficult that it's something just spontaneous that comes to us. Usually we see others and we put together here and there and we make our own story. The fact of having a sane example of someone that transmits us a sane dream, then it allows us to follow that path. If, as a point of reference, I have someone that shows me that the right thing is violence, what way will I follow? That of violence. If there is someone that I trust, there is my point of reference that shows me that the right way is that of earning as much money as you can, and that is the main goal, I follow that. I will follow the way of earning as much money as possible. And as we can see, who we have as a reference determines the direction that we ourselves take in our own life. And here we have the first benefit of that is undeniable of relying correctly upon a spiritual guide, because we want to follow a spiritual path. And from the moment that I rely upon a spiritual path, then I have a path to follow, and that gradually brings me in that direction. On the other hand, if I don't rely upon a spiritual guide, then I will rely upon someone else, because hardly we will find someone that doesn't rely upon anyone, doesn't have a point of reference, doesn't have anyone to follow, whether he's alive or not. We in society, if we go and see, naturally we have a tendency to aggregate, to find the similar people that gives us a direction. Everyone tries to find this at their best. There is who finds this in the context of politics or of music or of sports and so on. and we follow the example that we have in front.
Nell'aspetto dell'atto negativo,
And here, in the aspect of the negative side, there are two things. If I don't rely upon someone that is sane, I don't have an example to follow, I don't have a clear path to follow. If I rely upon someone that guides me in an improper way, that is even worse, because I put my energy in an unhealthy direction. And unfortunately, this happens. It's not something that cannot happen. And then there is also another point that actually comes a bit later, that is the fact what is also the importance of maintaining a sane relationship with a spiritual guide and the negative act of breaking this healthy relationship. Because when we have trust, this allows us to walk, to go forward. When this trust breaks, then to recreate it is very difficult. It's much more difficult than at the beginning. And so it's fundamental to create this relationship and to remain in a way that is continuative and profound and to cultivate it. So why do I rely upon a spiritual guide? What is the benefit? So that I am taken gradually on a process of spiritual development. And this means a lot. For me, actually, this already is enough. Then there are also the others which are nice, but the fundamental point is this: when here it says it gradually takes you to reach the state of enlightenment. In other words, it means since the moment that I rely upon a spiritual guide, then I have a path, an example, a way to be followed, and whether I am aware or not, I am walking in that direction. And this is not a matter of I have someone that for me becomes like an idol and I idolate that person, then I receive some mystical benefits of something. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the fact that whether I am aware or not, I look for examples to follow. And sometimes there are also examples of life where you rely upon beings that are not there. For example, Harry Potter, maybe. Why not? Or whatever other story or movie. It's a narrative that I follow, a character that embodies those characteristics upon which I rely, and my life is influenced by that. And it's not a joke. Who I have as an idol changes the path of life that I take. I repeat once again. One of the things on which we should be really careful is that when we rely upon someone, we should rely upon someone that, how can I say, I try to say it in a way that is clear and gentle. I need to trust someone that cares really about me and about my spiritual development, but doesn't care about being my spiritual guide. I need to rely upon someone that cares about my happiness, but doesn't care about being whom loves me. I don't know if this is clear. Because if I go to someone that cares at the basis about being who guides me, then the fact of guiding me is nothing else but a tool to nourish, to increase one's own ego, his or her own ego. And then it lacks, even if apparently it's there, then the fundamental basis of love then is missing, because it's a selfish love. And this happens also in this field. we shouldn't follow that person, this or that person, because that person has some titles in the spiritual context, or because he's like an influential person. For me, trusting upon a spiritual guide is much more similar uh, to falling in love, to getting into an experience that really allows me to trust. And this reminds me one of my masters in Tibet, where this was created in a mutual way. The first time that I went to him to receive teachings was more like a formal thing, yes, and we had this path together of getting to know each other, and to develop a mutual trust that then created a very deep connection. And it's something that we cannot take for granted. And so, from the moment that I trust spiritually upon someone, and this doesn't mean that you're there one-to-one and talking. It's not about that. There have been in the history many practitioners that have had great realizations, and that they met their spiritual guide just once, and they received the teachings, and then they followed their own path, because the path is not made out of receiving many teachings. It's made out of putting them in practice. What we need to receive actually is little. A few days ago, I was talking with someone and was like, whatever. It came out that the fact that my first book, and that actually my mother wrote for me, was the transcription of the first teachings that I gave in '94. So it's called The Young Idea of Peace, and someone read it, and he said that this person also said, I've seen the videos of you talking. You were saying the same things that you're saying now today. I am sorry that I am so boring. But the point is that if what we need is uniquely someone that tells us something, also we can just listen to that just once. Sometimes I have the feeling that my task is not of explaining something, but to do like a collective meditation. We repeat the things that we already know to generate that inner feeling. But the reality is that also one time would be enough to just receive some transmissions and then to put them into practice. For example, today, this afternoon, we have the luck of having here Sherab Rinpoche, and he will give the transmission of this wonderful practice called the practice of Chöd, that actually one could also get to know Sherab Rinpoche just once and receive him, this initiation for him, but to practice this every day and receive many realizations. One could also decide to go and live with him in India and to see him every day, talk with him every day, and not practice much. And maybe 30 years pass, and then who has only seen him once managed to get who knows where, and then who lived with him stayed behind. And so once that we have received the teachings, met the guide, then we need to put our own effort. And sometimes to be really close to the spiritual guide, physically speaking, has many positive aspects, but also some dangers. One of the dangers is that somehow
No, andiamo, noi ci mettiamo un po' ci mettiamo la responsabilità del nostro percorso nella mano della guida.
we put the responsibility of our own path in the hands of our own guru, because we say, look, I'm always close. And this is also what I've seen with Lama Ganchen many times. His presence was so strong that one was kind of anesthetized when he was next to him. It was like blissful, in this blissful state that was constant, which is wonderful in many aspects. But then it's up to each one to actually walk the path. And so, why do I repeat this? Is because it doesn't matter how physically close we are to the spiritual guide, or how many teachings we receive, but how much we put them into practice. So the first benefit on which we should reflect is that if I rely correctly, then I have a clear path to follow, and this will gradually bring me until we'll be able to get out of my cycle of suffering and to reach this deep state of peace, until I can really be a positive interdependence for the world that surrounds me. And for this, me, sincerely, is already enough. And so, this is the first benefit that is there. Then, what Paponka Rinpoche brings us
E questa parte, no, Paponka Rinpoche la divide in due parti, che dice: vi avvicinerete allo stato.
Paponka Rinpoche divides this part in two parts. Okay, you will come closer to Buddhahood by practicing the instructions he taught you. So we get closer to Buddhahood when we rely upon a spiritual guide. Is because this will naturally bring us to put things in practice. And the other is that you would also come closer to Buddhahood by making offerings to the Guru and following his advice. Here there is also another important aspect. How can I say? In our lives in general, there are then two fundamental aspects that for which in our language the concept is missing, and so also the word. And it's a bit difficult because these are two fundamental concepts in the Buddhist view that then in Italian we don't have, or in English we don't have the word. But when they are translated, a word is used in English or Italian. On one hand, the word merit is used. On the other hand, the word negative actions, or there is even who uses sin. But let's forget these words a bit. Let's try to understand the concept. The principle is the following. I don't experience anything without having created the causes to experience that first. So everything that I live is the sum of causes that I've created in the past and conditions that I meet in the present. Then, when we will face the law of karma, when we'll look into that, we will understand this better. But what happens is that the actions that we make, physically, verbally, or mentally, is that they generate a force or an inertia that brings us to have some positive experiences of feeling joy, peace. These are virtuous actions. In Sanskrit is used the word punya, in Tibetan sonam, but this can be called positive causes, called merits. But what happens is that I create a positive interdependence. I create a force, an inertia through that action that then sooner or later will manifest in a state of peace, of well-being. Then on the other hand, there are the actions that once having been created, they create this inertia that once it's manifested in the experience on the consciousness, then they manifest as states of suffering. They are called pakpa in Sanskrit, dikpa in Tibetan. They can be translated as negative karmic force, would be the closest term. So what happens is the following. If I want to experience a state of well-being, a state of joy, a state of peace, other than getting into in touch with virtuous feelings as love and gratitude and so on, I also need to accumulate some positive karmic force, the causes to be able to sustain that inner state of consciousness. And to generate this so-called positive karmic force, the most effective and immediate way that there is in sharing and offering. So when I offer something to the other, naturally I am generating a karmic force of something positive that then comes back to me. And in offering to others, this is divided in two parts. Making an offering to someone that spiritually is on the same path as we do, or less, that is called an act of generosity. And when we make an offering towards someone that is spiritually more evolved than us, or that guides us along this path, then this is called an offering. It's always still the same act of offering, of sharing, but this sharing is what creates a basis that can gives us the necessary sustainment to sustain certain states of consciousness. And so it's not enough a conceptual path, there is also part of generating a basis, so to speak, that is energetical, that sustains that state. An example to understand this is that it's not enough to have a lot of money and to live in a beautiful house, to have a lot of beautiful food and nice people around. This doesn't determine an inner state of well-being, of happiness. If one doesn't have the inner basis to sustain that happiness, at a certain point it doesn't work anymore. But on the other hand, when one has that very strong inner basis to sustain happiness, even when conditions apparently are not there, then that state remains. That state is still sustained. Can we imagine some examples of this? So, along our path, there is an analytical part of narrative, understanding, reflecting, and then there is an important part that is that of generating an inner base, the so-called merits of positive karmic force that can sustain us along our spiritual path. And the basis for this is mostly the process of sharing, of giving. When we offer, we are also doing an action making that is maybe not totally but partly, that goes like against the fundamental cause of our suffering, that is our selfishness. And in the offering, because as we offer, it requires partly, if not totally, to see the other. And so this is one of the strongest actions that we have. And Buddha Shakyamuni described that along our spiritual path, the first quality on which we should create familiarity and to train ourselves is generosity, because he said that with generosity, that is not only the easiest of the qualities to train us, but that also creates the basis to sustain the path that then comes after that. And so in this process, when we find ourselves in front of our spiritual guide, that we have the opportunity of offering, and the offering happens in 1,000 different ways, but when I offer something, I am offering something to someone towards which I feel gratitude, and gratitude is one of the most important feelings in our path. So when I make an offering with this feeling of gratitude, what happens is that I generate a basis that sustains that path. Also because there is another aspect, that is when I offer something to you, then it means that I give value to you. And then this also has an effect on us. Because my personal experience with my spiritual guides is that my act of respect towards them and of gratitude is something from which I've always received benefit. It's not something that is about them, it's about me. This is my experience. Because it's good for me to feel gratitude. It's good for me to have trust. And this helps me to cultivate this state. And so when we talk about making offerings, it's not something like the more offerings I make, the closer I get to enlightenment. It's not like the points of the supermarket that you collect to have that thing. No, it's not about that. It's It's like, okay, I have like I have this tool that allows me to generate this positive karmic force that sustains this path. And among the various offerings, the most excellent offering that one can make to his spiritual guide or her spiritual guide is one's own spiritual practice. The easiest and the lowest level offering that one can make is the material offering. I offer something is a sign of gratitude, a sign of respect, and also when we talk and we say, how much should I offer? What I have always done in my life is thinking that I should offer what is not too much and not too little. For one, 10 means a lot. For another one, 10 means very little. It depends on the reality of each one. Because what determines the offering is not a material thing, is an inner reality. To me, it has happened to receive as a gift something that I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? But then I saw that who offered it did it with the best intentions and that he cared a lot about it. Sometimes a person offered me inside the envelope a piece of ashish, and I looked at it and I'm like, what do I do with this? And then one could be left badly, and then I was like, okay, what are you doing? This is like an impure thing, and to make 1,000 discourses and so on. On the other hand, I say, okay, if someone offers it, then it means that that person cares about it. Then another aspect, another subject is to say it's good or it's not good. But if I offer what is valuable for me, then that offering has value. Here there is a very simple rule for me. If you give me something as a present, what you have given to me, who owns that thing once it's given? To Lama it would happen quite often. They will make him a present. Maybe you will give him like a flower or like a stick. Okay, thank you, how beautiful. And then there will be the person next to him. Oh, look, I have a present for you. And then there will be left badly for that. But then it's like, okay, you have done your part. You've made the offering, and once you've offered, then he owns that thing and he offers that to someone else. But not because he doesn't care about it. That's also not the key here. It's not like the point is the act of offering. Maybe I give you something that you don't need, but on the other hand, that for me has a great value, and I offer it to you with the best of the intentions, and that offering has a power by itself. And so because of this, here I open and close a parenthesis, there is the generosity also of being able to receive. Because when someone makes us a gift, being able to welcome and to receive that gift is also a way to give something to who gives. Not being able to receive, not allowing oneself to receive, on the other hand, is a form of avarice in some way. It has happened to me once that they made me a present that I was not able to receive it. One person comes to me and he wanted to give me a pair of rabbits, and I was like, I imagine getting home with the 2 rabbits. Where do I put the rabbits? Then they reproduce themselves. What happens with them? What do I do? Then I said, look, I accept your gift with one condition. Because you have many rabbits, you continue with them. Okay, they are mine, but you continue with them. I give them the name, and because I also thought, okay, poor rabbits if I bring them home. I also thought about that. But the fact is that the act of offering, this is important for us to understand, what is about the act of offering is not the object that is offered. The important thing is the act, is what happens, and not the thing that is offered. There are the visualized offerings, imagined. There are many things that can be done. What gives value is not an objective material value, because there is no such thing as objective, but the act that happens with the feeling that is placed there. And so when we offer is because there is affection, there is gratitude, there is love. And here, one of the characteristics that Pabonka Rinpoche remembers is that when one relies correctly upon a spiritual guide, he or she creates this opportunity of making these offerings to offer one's own practice, to offer one's own trust, to offer on whatever level. Also material offerings, offerings of giving love and trust, offering of the spiritual guide, offering of service and help, many types of offerings that can be made.
Per dire ai nostri genitori,
for example, about our parents, maybe the majority of us have already a bit of an advanced age for this example, but when someone cares a lot about us and that person gives us some advice and we follow it, isn't that an offering that we make to that person? This is a way to offer. This is one of the best way to offer. But when we create a relationship, also this space is created to make these offerings, and this is one of the tools that allows us to sustain and grow along our path. I think this is quite clear. And so we again take back the book.
uno dei benefici che Pabonka Rinpoche cita qui è che
one of the benefits that Pabonka Rinpoche quotes here is that by relying correctly upon a spiritual guide, you will also please all the victorious ones, which means that you will make the Buddhas happy. This basically means to do the right things, to live a sane life, to cultivate love, gratitude, respect, wisdom, to face our own anger, jealousy, fear, to grow spiritually, and to live life in a virtuous way. This is what could make any being that has such a vision happy. And this is not about you're a good Buddhist and then Buddhas are happy. It's not that. Somehow it's like that those that have a clear awareness of virtue, of what is healthy, of what is sane, and have love towards us and compassion, when we do the right thing, we make them happy. And so also for this, the best offering that we can make to all the Buddhas is to practice Dharma, to change our conduct in a virtuous way, to follow a sane life. This is the best offering that we can make. Also, the best offering that we can make to our doctor is to follow the treatment, to change our diet, follow his indications or her indications.
poi ci sono altri benefici che semmai li andiamo a vedere.
Then there are other benefits, maybe we will list them tomorrow quickly. For example, it is also said that when one correctly relies upon a spiritual guide, that naturally is protected by bad influences and protected also by negative influences of spirits. There are many stories that talk about this. What happens is the following. Here there are two fundamental aspects on this. One is the fact that when I have a direction that is virtuous, sane, and I have trust and I follow this direction in a solid way, so to speak, this also generates an inner force that naturally protects me. I make a trivial example. When I have clarity about my path, if there are people close to me that try to convince me about something different, they are just words. I remain on my path. If, on the other hand, I don't have a clear way to follow, then I go a bit here, and then whoever manages to talk about things in a way that is seductive, then I go here and there, and I'm influenced on many ways. And this happens either on a gross level, like images, things, words, but we can also see a manifestation of this as the word of internet. Like, and we can see how easily one is taken and influenced by hatred feelings, because unfortunately that happens. One that has a very clear dharma way doesn't get into things that is about hatred, about this or that. Naturally is protected. Now one protects oneself about this. So when we rely correctly upon the spiritual guide, then we protect ourselves from the unhealthy ways, unhealthy paths. And on the other hand, also what happens is this, that the more we have an inner state, an inner feeling of trust in our path, the more we're able to have a virtuous conduct, the more it will be difficult for us to be influenced on a subtle level. What is the subtle level? That it's the non-verbal level, both by people and people that and beings that don't have a physical body. And so the best protection that we can have is to have a clear way, a clear path, and a feeling of trust, love. And when we have this path well established, and the more love we develop also to the others, the more this protection becomes stronger. It's not something like, you've taken refuge, from this moment you will not receive any negative influence because there is someone protecting you. This is not the concept. The concept is that since the moment that I rely upon a spiritual guide and consequently I put Dharma in practice and I have that priority, naturally I develop an inner force that protects me from any other negative influence. I think this is quite clear. And so then there is also a nice story about this. It is said that the simple fact of taking refuge, or also of reciting the Take of Refuge, protects and pushes away some negative influences. It is said that in Tibet it happened that once there was like a medium that would embody some local spirits, and once local spirit is embodied, and he complains, he tells about this story. One day in a monastery comes a thief, and this thief is stealing in the room of this monk. The monk catches him and he hits him with a stick. I take refuge in the Buddha, he says. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. He hits him 3 times saying the take of refuge. And he runs away, the thief runs away and hides behind, under a bridge. And so he's there the whole night, and his shoulder hurts, and he's all the time, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, thank God there are only 3 jewels. He will repeat these things during the night, remembering it. And there was this spirit that was living under that bridge and had to go away. And so when he was embodied, he said, look, I spent a terrible night because there was that person that couldn't stop invoking Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, so I couldn't stay there. And this is a story that is said to say that even without the inner feeling, the word the word naturally connects with the meaning, what we have talked about previously, the commitment being and the wisdom being. When I say Buddha, for as much as I have or not a feeling of faith, then I connect with Buddha. When I say Dharma, if I know what that word means, of course, then inevitably I connect with Dharma, or whether I have that feeling or not. And so, the fact that I recite those verses, naturally, that pushes away of that place the beings that had a negative influence. So this is also to say that when one relies correctly on a spiritual path and relies upon what is virtuous, that naturally creates a protection from what is non-virtuous, both on a gross level and on a subtle level. I think this is quite clear. Then I know that this is an argument in our society that is a bit taboo, talking about spirits and these kind of things, something of which we don't know much, of which we have a hard time dealing with. But spirits are a bit like humans. The only difference is that they have no physical body. They have same dynamics of envy, attraction, aversion, attachment, fear. The same dynamics, really much, very similar. And when we are on a virtuous path, that naturally protects us from what is non-virtuous. In other words, when we create a sane habit, the more that habit is strong, the more we protect ourselves from harmful habits and harmful influences. I think this is quite clear, isn't it? For example, another benefit, and with this we close, is that taking refuge correctly and relying correctly with a spiritual guide protects us from rebirths, so-called lower rebirths of more suffering. It's not that it protects us from a lower rebirth because I took refuge, so I'm placed there in the group that is protected. It's not that. It's because when I correctly rely upon a spiritual guide, that naturally brings me to have a certain conduct, certain way of living, and that as a consequence grants me as a positive continuity from life to life. That grants me a good death. And this already by itself means a lot. And it's not that it grants me a good death because there is someone that grants it for me, because sorry if I say it like this, but I have the feeling that very often we want to find the savior. So I rely upon you, and so that's it, I'm done. But what saves us, what guides us, is not the person to whom on which we rely upon, but the life that comes as a consequence, the virtue that we cultivate. And so someone could say, I don't need to rely upon anyone, I just need to live in a certain way. But to have a certain kind of conduct, then the basis is that relationship of trust. Having trust in the medicine, and so the dharma, the spiritual path that we receive, so it starts from that basis. That is the starting point that allows everything else to happen. And so let's reflect. These are some of the points on which we should reflect. Okay, why do I need to rely upon a spiritual guide? This allows me to grow on the path towards enlightenment. This allows me to protect myself from bad influences, to generate a positive karmic force that sustains this path. This already by itself allows me to have the conditions to have a good continuity from life to life, to have a good death. By good death, I mean the inner state with which one dies. I had the great luck these years of seeing Western people here in Brazil to be able to die well. For me, really is a great honor when I can be close to someone that is dying and is able to die well. To die well means to die with no fear, with a sense of gratitude, with an inner feeling of peace. For me, it comes to my mind two women that died here, Burma and Maria Lopez, two people with very difficult states, but their relying, their trust, their love, their path brought them to this state of peace. And so, when we rely correctly and we follow that path, one of the benefits is that we can grant ourselves that we will die in peace and consequently to have a good continuity after that. One of the benefits that is quoted is that if we rely correctly upon a spiritual guide, then we will have who will guide us from life to life, because we create a familiarity, a deep familiarity, a profound and strong connection. This naturally from life to life goes on, and it needs little for that predisposition to come to the surface and to manifest itself. When we rely correctly upon a spiritual guide, that naturally brings us to create a familiarity with our spiritual path, and this then becomes such a deep habit that even from life to life, naturally, that will manifest itself, and we will have a sane spiritual path, whether it's on the Buddhist tradition or not, doesn't matter. But there is continuity. So I feel like these are enough reasons to do it. So we should list and create a narrative to help us to generate more and more that wish to generate, to rely correctly. With this, we conclude for this morning. This afternoon, now we will make the dedications, but before that, I would just want to remember, Sherab Rinpoche will give this initiation. Here there is an aspect that is interesting, that is, someone could say, but how can I receive teachings and to rely upon a master that I don't know? In this case, there is an effect that it goes like, okay, I trust Sherab Rinpoche, one trusts me, then naturally one can trust him in that sense. He will give this transmission today, where there is one very interesting aspect, and particularly also in our times where it's given importance. It's one of the very few practices, very serious practices, that comes from a female lineage. This practice, that is called the practice of Chöd, that is the practice that puts together music, singing, meditation, as a way of cutting our selfishness and the wrong view of self. So to cut ignorance and to cut selfishness. And he has a very diffuse practice in Tibet, and the first person that transmitted it was Machik Labradon. She was this woman in Tibet that created this practice, and she transmitted it. From her, subsequently, comes this lineage. There is also there in the Galupa lineage. And it's a very profound, strong, beautiful practice. And to receive this initiation, what does it mean? Mostly, to open a door that allows you from right away or tomorrow to do this practice. So in order to do this practice, this requires to have received this initiation. So Sherab Rinpoche, not only he received the initiation in a, but also he practices it in a very serious way. So he has the knowledge, he has all the papers, so to speak, to transmit this practice in an excellent way. So I asked him personally to give the transmission of Chöd as a practice that I want also to nourish here in the center. There is also a small group that practices every month. It's not a simple practice in the sense that you need to play the drum well, you need to know the melodies, and it's beautiful because it puts together the artistic aspect together with the philosophical and meditative aspect, and it's something very beautiful. And I repeat, this is a female lineage that starts from Machik Labdrong. Now, without getting long into this, Sherab Rinpoche will give this initiation this afternoon. I will give the translation. He will speak in Tibetan. I will do the simultaneous translation in Italian. Then there will be a person translating from Italian to English. We will do a simultaneous translation also for a reason of timing to facilitate everyone. So if you have your own headphones, of course the ones with the wires, then you can bring your own headphones and then you can plug them into the transmitters and to listen to the initiation. Now let's make our final dedications.
Drove munsel taktu ne gyur che nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin ninsen taktu delek pe kuncho sumke chingi lob sumke ngodrutso kuncho sumke tashi shu. Un'ultima cosa.
One last thing, because then maybe tomorrow I forget, very brief. Let's remember that when we say spiritual guide, there are various synonyms. There is the word guru, that in our culture has come sometimes with a wrong meaning, because it brings the idea of having to put ourselves in the hands of someone and lose our ourselves. But for me the most important word is Kalyana Mitra. That means the virtuous friend, the virtuous. So a friend is someone that loves us. Virtuous is that there is a relationship that helps us to follow a sane way. So also the way that I see myself with you is not to be above you and to tell you I have to do like this and that, but like, okay, I'm walking towards a certain direction. Who wants to come? We can walk together, you know. And so also in talking about the importance of a spiritual guide, it's not that I'm imposing on you this or that. No, absolutely not. It's more than anything like, okay, I'm walking towards this direction. This is a fundamental part of my path on which I trust completely, and so who wants to walk together, let's walk together. The steps I've already done, I help towards who wants to make these steps, and then maybe one day the disciple also will help the master. And there are many stories also where the disciple reach enlightenment and then help the master to do the same. And so for me the word that gets the closest to it is the virtuous friend. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and to sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Buon appetito a tutti. Oggi non farò il momento di poter ricevere ognuno.
Today we will not have the moment where I can receive everyone for one reason, because now I have to prepare myself to translate the initiation in order to be able to translate in the best way, so that we can also start on time.